having experts from the area of policy, from the area of action, from the area of quantitative and qualitative research to share their experiences in a system of roundtable. So for today, we shall focus on an issue which is of great relevance to the rural development programs. That is the performance and possibilities of rural transformation through infrastructure and innovations beyond. Imagine is infrastructure beyond the industries for rural development is something that we want to talk about today. The translation of regional development policies at the top into programs and initiatives at the bottom and vice versa is a complex process, both in theory and also to implement in practicality. So how communities absorb innovations or benefit from infrastructure remains to be understood. A critical understanding of the government-run infrastructure schemes, how they perform, and in what societal and governance environment they succeed will remain a critical policy question and a crucial question to understand. So taking this policy discussion forward, today's webinar will be focusing on the 9th SDG, that is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. I introduce you to the themes and the speakers we have with us today. I would like to invite Dr. Partha Pratim Sahu, who is the head of the Center of Good Governance and Policy and also a faculty of Entrepreneurship Development and Financial Inclusion, to officially start the program and welcome our speakers. Dr. Partha, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruchira. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening if anyone has joined from outside India. And on behalf of our Director General, Dr. G. Narendra Kumar, and on behalf of all faculty and family member of NIRD, and two coordinators, Dr. Ruchira and myself, Dr. P.P. Sahu, I extend a warm welcome to two eminent speakers and all the attendees who have joined today to listen to this very important talk on this infrastructure. And this is a very apt time to talk on this infrastructure when the whole world is facing the humanitarian crisis. And infrastructure is a cross-cutting issue. And if we have a robust, good infrastructural facilities, it will put us in a situation that we will make substantial progress in almost all SDGs. And now the new narrative, new discussion that we are listening from the government, that we now talk about impact investment. And what is impact investment? In all state-supported, state-funded project, be it infrastructure or otherwise, we want to generate socially desirable outcome as well as some financial return. So the whole issue of infrastructural financing is very important for all developing countries and more so for a country like India. So today we are very lucky to have two eminent speakers, Dr. Dylan and Mr. Tomas, to deliberate on various issues related to this infrastructure, innovative mechanism to finance infrastructure, and many other related issues. So with this, again, I welcome both the eminent speaker and all the participants who have joined today. And I request Dr. Ruchira to take it forward. Thank you, Dr. Ruchira.
Thank you, Partha. So let me introduce you to the theme and the speakers that we have with us today. So the webinar of rural transformation through innovations and infrastructure beyond industry will focus on very important aspect of rural infrastructure to initiate discussion on these questions that we were talking about earlier. The first talk by Professor Amrita Dhillon critically compares Government of India sponsored schemes, especially MGNREGA and PMGSY. Amrita Dhillon is a professor of economics in the Department of Political Economy. She is in the King's College London, UK. She is also research group leader of quantitative political economy. She graduated from State University of New York, Stony Brook with a PhD in 1994. Her training is in theoretical modeling, including political economy, public economics, game theory, and development. Her main field of research is political economy. She has organized several workshops on topics ranging from sovereign debt, reputational models in economics, to a recent workshop on governance, which was sponsored by the Journal of Public Economic Theory. Professor Dhillon is widely published in areas in development economics and public finance. She was elected as council member of the Royal Economic Society UK from 2014 to 2019, and she is currently the senior editor at Oxford Open Economics and a member of CEPR Political Economy Group. We heartily welcome Professor Dhillon for her time today and for agreeing to take this talk with us and sharing her insights. After Professor Dhillon's presentation, we will have Mr. Tomas Stenstrom, and her critical comparison will be followed by a global perspective of innovative ways of building infrastructure. Mr. Stenstrom from ILO will share the examples of generating livelihood through infrastructure projects. He is a senior specialist on employment-intensive investments based in New Delhi office of International Labour Organization. Prior to this, he was a chief technical advisor to the ILO. A master's in civil engineering by training, his professional goal is to contribute to a better and more equitable world through sustainable development in the developing countries. He wants to promote employment-intensive investment strategies, primarily for infrastructure development, while improving livelihoods and local economic development can generate immediate income and jobs for poor communities. We hope that the synopsis of the webinar should take us forward to a discussion how programmatic convergence and social innovation can foster the achievements under SDG 9 in India's villages. I would now like to invite Professor Dhillon for sharing her presentation and her insights with us. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much for this invitation, Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Sahu. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see?
Yes, we can see the presentation. If you can put it in slide. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So once again, thanks very much. Very happy to be able to present this work that we carried out. This was a study. I mean, this was part of a larger grant that we had on studying top-down audits and bottom-up community monitoring. And the two programs that we had focused on for that grant were MNREGA and PMGSY. So as a sort of side outcome of that study, we also, since we were already creating indicator variables for these two programs, we thought, this would be important to see how to compare how the various states have fared in India over 2 decades. So now, why do we want rankings at all? The World Bank report in 2014 is just one example out of many in economics, which says or which suggests that rankings can be used to motivate individuals or organizations to improve performance. So that might be one reason why we want to have a comparison across the states and that comparison to be made public. And recently, Niti Aayog has also recommended similar rankings in the case of health and family welfare. So they have been spearheading this health index initiative since 2017 to measure the annual performance of states and union territories across a wide range of measures. So these include health outcomes, governance, and processes. And this index will basically, what I want to emphasize is the last sentence, that it is aimed at nudging the states towards transformative action in the health sector. So the idea is that, having the states competing on these on improving their rankings can help to improve outcomes overall in this federal structure. So this talk is based on a paper which is written with Farzana Afridi, Arka Roy Chaudhary, and Satvik. And what we do is we use publicly available data on MNREGA and PMGSY. The years that are given are for MNREGA is 2011 to 2019, for PMGSY from its inception till 2019. So that's PMGSY 1. And we have used that to create new measures of performance. Of course, there's already a literature that exists on these sorts of measures, but usually they are sort of subsets of in the time or the sort of spatial coverage for us is much bigger. So basically, we think that this is sort of this is a study that examined 19 major states in India over these 2 decades, and so in that sense, it is it is sort of incorporating all the other studies. So we use the data to create measures of performance, and then we use that to rank the various states on these performance indicators for both these programs. We also try to explain why we see the patterns that we do, like why is it that some states are performing better than others, and we try to link it to some possible explanatory variables, which include things like administrative capacity, accountability, and the level of development, the level of the human development index. So these are some of the factors that we think might explain these differences across states. So if we come to why is it important to study these two programs? Well, obvious reasons are the large budget that is allocated to these programs annually, and also in terms of the objectives of these programs, which is to either to provide livelihood to the rural poor, employment which enhances their livelihood security, especially for the marginalized communities. And in the case of PMGSY, even more importantly, is to connect the rural villages, small rural villages, to the highways, which we know is a major major factor in leading to development. So the budget is around US dollars 8.33 billion. That was, I think, in 2000. I don't remember the exact, but 2016, I think. And in the case of PNGSY, in 2016, it was USD 2.71 billion. So in cumulative terms, it's closer to 40 billion US dollars. And this is the kilometers of roads that have been built till our study was carried out, which is till 2019. So now I'll just give you a little brief survey of some of the data that we have used. So we have used the Manrega data for the public data portal for Manrega, and we in this data we include 19 major states, but we include some of the states that are either too small or have been having problems like J&K. As we feel these are not representative. Telangana has been excluded because the data was not available on the portal. Then for PMGSY, we use the OMMS, which people probably know over here. So it's the Online Management Monitoring and Accounting System, again, publicly available. And we restrict it to PMGSY1 because of the longer time span for analysis. Telangana is included in Andhra Pradesh, although it was split in 2014. We want to keep in order to keep the comparison constant across our time period, which is from 2000, we include it in AP. Then we also use data on the state level poverty line, as well as poverty rates. We use the NSS 68 round, and the CPI rural, so the Consumer Price Index Rural Labor Series from the Labor Bureau is used to deflate expenditure in order to make it comparable across states. So we use the state-wise CPI RL series. Then for the administrative capacity, we measure that using the 2001 census and the 2011 census. We use HDI, the Human Development Index measures from the Global Data Lab, per capita income from Ministry of Statistics, and the Handbook of Statistics on Indian States from the RBI. Similarly, data on highway length and rural wages are from the RBI handbook, and the paper has more details on all of our other data sources that we use for measures of corruption at the state level, and ethnic fractionalization and so on. So now I come to describe to you the performance indicators that we created. Okay, so for Manrega, we created basically two types of measures. The first measures coverage. So this coverage can include demographic coverage, which basically how many people were being covered in the in the year on average, how many people were working under Manrega. But obviously we need to take it as a proportion of the demand, right? Because there's also the demand side. It could be that the state is willing to supply employment to people, but they're just not willing to take it up. So basically, we want a measure of the demand for employment as well. And so the proxy we use, because it has been pointed out in many papers that it is the demand for employment is very difficult to measure in the publicly available data. So what we use is a proxy for the 2011 below poverty line adult rural population. So the idea is that people who are below poverty line are, states which have a higher proportion of below poverty line adult rural people will have a higher demand for Manrega. Okay, so this is fixed at 2011, right? So it's so that's important to understand. So this is the proportion that we use for demographic coverage. So what is the proportion that is supplied of employment as a proportion of the demand? And then the financial coverage is basically the amount of money that has been spent per 2011 below poverty line rural adult again. So, and that's inflation adjusted using the state-wise consumer price index for rural labor. And this accounts for wage and price differences across states as well. So these are the coverage indicators. So how many people have been covered, how much money has been spent. And then on the other hand, we also have measures for intensity, which is, so while on the extensive margin, you may have an increase in the number of people that are covered by the scheme, but it could be that in terms of the average number of days worked per person might be very low. So we also take account of the intensive margin, which is through the intensity. That's the average number of days worked per program participant. That's the demographic intensity, and the financial is basically, similar to the wage, but it's an inflation adjusted average yearly payment per program participant. Okay, so this is the intensity measures. And then we combine these to create some composite indicators so that we can again rank states on the basis of one composite indicator. So first what we do is we have to convert, since all of these measures, the measures that I showed here have different units, we need to convert them to the same unit. So we do that using this normalization formula where you take the particular value, it could be demographic coverage for a particular state, minus the minimum across all states. So what was the worst state in terms of coverage, and that divided by the best performing minus the worst performing. So this converts everything to a 0-1 sort of indicator. And basically what it's doing is measuring the performance relative to the best and the worst performing states. And then we combine these things, so we combine, say, the coverage, which could be demographic or financial, and we can combine these two in a one composite index of coverage. Okay, so one composite index of the coverage, which is here. And that is taking this kind of converted value for demographic coverage and financial coverage, and then using the geometric mean of that, right? So that would be like, so if we just have two of the measures in that, it would just be the normalized value for the demographic coverage multiply to the power of half multiplied by the financial coverage to the power of half. Okay, so that would give you the geometric mean. And similarly for the composite intensity, that would be using these two, the demographic and financial intensity, creating the composite, creating the similar normalized values, and then using the geometric mean. And then a composite overall with all four indicators. So the idea here is, because we are multiplying them, and we give them an equal weight in this multiplication, the idea is that they are not really substitutes for each other. So it's not that, if a state performs well on one, then and very badly on another, it gets a high rank. That's what this indicator does, is to say that all these indicators are kind of equally important. And so if a state does poorly on one but very well on another, it would get a rank of that's very low. Okay, so that's important to understand when we're using the geometric mean. We then calculate these composite indicators for each state, not only for the general population, which includes including the SC/ST population, but we also compute it specifically for the SC/ST population. Okay, we don't have the figures for financial over there, so we use only the demographic for the SC/ST. So here's figure 1, which gives you the ranking of states, or the state performance on coverage and intensity. So on the horizontal axis, we have the composite intensity indicator, which goes between 0 and 1. And on the vertical axis, we have the composite coverage indicator also, which goes between 0 and 1. And we can see here that Kerala is kind of a top performer. So it's like the higher you are over here, the better you are on both these indicators. And Himachal, Andhra, Tamil Nadu are also doing pretty well, probably more on the coverage than on the intensity. And then you see there are some states that perform quite badly. You can see Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, etc. And Bihar, strangely enough, is doing quite well on the composite intensity, but is doing badly on the composite average. So these are, obviously, these are rankings that we derive, but we need like deeper study to understand why some states are doing much better than others. But obviously, in Manrega, we do see that there are some top performers which are, which include all of these states over here at the top. And then we've created also these heat maps. So again, you can have a look at these heat maps to see which states are doing better. And of course, the higher the number, the better the state is doing. So we can see that, for example, here is Kerala. This is basically Andhra Pradesh, and here we have Himachal Pradesh. So these are some of the top performers. So the darker blue ones are the best, and then the slightly MP is pretty low, but some of the lighter blue ones, and then it goes down even more further. So Gujarat is doing quite badly over here, and this is, I guess, is Bihar over here. So. So then we come to the composite intensity, and here you see that again, this is Himachal, which is the dark blue. Kerala is again doing really well, and Bihar, on the other hand, is not doing so badly on the composite intensity, which is what we saw in the initial figure as well. So I mean, this is just to show you that we have created these heat maps, which can easily be done. Since we have rankings of the states on these various indicators, and again, these could be quite useful for the government. So our main results are, as we have all the tables in the working paper. I'm not putting them here because they are quite big, but basically the results are that demographic coverage seems to be high in most of the states, but there is considerable variation, and the maximum and minimum differ by almost 15 times. It's a factor of 15. And financial coverage, again, the variation is very high, from an average of 1,000 rupees to 20,000 rupees. The intensity indicators are less variable between states, and overall we find low SC/ST coverage, which is similar to results found in Liu and Barnett in 2012. So these are the main results on the static side. We also do a dynamic analysis. We want to see that have some states improved relative to others. And most importantly, the question we ask is whether there is convergence across the states over time. And what we find is that West Bengal improves on intensity, Andhra Pradesh and Punjab improve on coverage, Kerala is always a top performer. And then when we regress the compound annual growth rates on the initial values of the indicator in 2011, we find that there is no convergence on coverage, but on intensity. And even overall, if you look at the overall composite, we do see convergence in Manrega across states over time. Okay, so it's a puzzling fact that we don't see this convergence on coverage, but maybe some experts in the audience will have answers for why that is the case. And now I come to the PMGSY. So I'm going quite fast because I know that there is a shortage of time. So we measure 5 aspects. We measure road completion rates, cost efficiency, contractor concentration, timeliness, and quality. We don't use the road length because that is already dictated by the core network. That was the basis for PMGSY. But what we use is the completion rate, both for new and upgraded roads. And so here, this is the percentage of new road length required to be built to complete the core network in 2000, which may have been completed as of March 2019. So this is the percentage that is still required to be built to complete the core network. And similarly, a similar measure for the upgrades is used. And then the composite is the normalized geometric mean measure of these two. Okay, So I won't go into the details of these small details on upgrade. This is all available in the paper, but this just basically to tell you that these are the main indicators that we look at. Then cost efficiency, again, we calculated for new and upgrades, and that is basically the expenditure per kilometer of completed road, which is deflated using the state-wise consumer price index. And this is important because, hopefully this takes account of the cost differences across states, which are an obvious critique of this measure. When you're comparing different states, some hilly states might have much higher costs than others. Some states have more difficult geographies than others. Then we use the contractor concentration based on the tenders which are received at the district level. And for this, we use the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, which is like a very common measure of concentration in markets. So this is basically defined as the sum of squares of the market share. And usually in the literature, less than 0.015 is treated as an unconcentrated market and over 0.25 as highly concentrated. And what we do is we take the distance of the average district HHI from 0.2. So the 0.2 is sort of an ideal level of concentration because we believe that too low levels of concentration also do not, is not healthy because usually road building would require a certain amount of economies of scale. So that's what we're accounting for. So contractor concentration in terms of what is good is that the closer it is to 0.2, the better it is in our paper. And then we look at timeliness. So here, the delay coverage and the delay intensity, which is the proportion of projects for which the actual date of completion is later than the stipulated date, and the average delay per kilometer within the delayed project. So again, extensive and intensive margin. And then we use the data from the national and state level quality monitors to also compute the quality of the quality of roads that are made. So quality can be coverage or intensity. Again, the percentage of road that was inspected at least once by an NQM or SQM is the quality coverage. So that sort of measures the degree to which monitoring is taking place actually, and quality intensity is maybe more important, which is the percentage of inspected road length that was deemed satisfactory. And then we also have the usual composite of the two based on the normalized geometric means. And then an overall composite, which can be used to rank the various states. So here's the heat map for the PMGSY using the composite overall. So combining all of the 5 measures that I showed you earlier on delays, on cost, coverage, contractor concentration and so on. And so here you get the ranking of the different states. Again, the darker blue, Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh turn out to be doing much better in this case than before. And Punjab also is doing quite well. So our main results are that road completion rates overall are quite low, and the highest is 71%. And as in Manrega, we also see considerable variation across states, both on the coverage and on cost efficiency. We also find that most states have highly fragmented markets. So in terms of competition, maybe this is a good thing that you have very fragmented markets, but on the other hand, if you need economies of scale to produce, to have a viable sort of company that is contractors that are being given these roads, then maybe that's not such a good sign. In terms of delays, 12 of the 19 states have average delays of at least 100 days per kilometer. And there is also a high correlation between the delayed projects and the length of delays. Finally, there's high variation in quality coverage going from 15% to 80%. And unlike Manrega, where we found that, some of the states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, they were doing well on all the indicators. Here, we don't have that. We have states that perform well on one indicator, may not be as good on other indicators. In fact, we find very little correlation between the ranks on these on the different indicators. Some states do well on some, and others do well on others. So here you can see the ranking of the states for PMGSY overall. So in terms of completeness, completing the roads, Madhya Pradesh is at the top, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, etc. But then in this case, in terms of efficiency, cost efficiency, Madhya Pradesh is somewhere over here. In terms of concentration, Madhya Pradesh is somewhere here. And then in terms of timeliness, Madhya Pradesh is coming close to the bottom. In terms of quality, Madhya Pradesh is at the top. So it's similar to the, it's third or fourth. So again, what I'm the main message of this graph is that there is no one, like on different measures, different states seem to come out on top. So it's again a puzzling fact that can be explored further. We also do some dynamic analysis. So we look at how states, whether they are improving over time or not. And again, here you don't see any general pattern, but overall cost effectiveness and timeliness seems to be deteriorating, but quality sees an improvement. And finally, is there convergence across states? So the good news is that there is convergence in PMGSY. And again, this is quite intuitive because PMGSY is meant to, convert, is to connect habitations which are not connected as yet. So we should expect this to happen. And indeed, it's a good sign that it is happening. So now that we have seen how different states are performing on these indicators, we might be more interested to understand like what is driving good performance, what is driving the bad performance. Can we make use of the information we have on the states to examine best practices and all that? So we haven't, of course, had the time or the level of detail to examine different states for why some are performing better than others, but we can look at some general, usual variables that influence this type of performance, which is things like administrative capacity and accountability and so on. So that's what we do now. We look at, as far as we can, we look at the district level data, and then we look at both supply side and demand side factors that might explain state performance or might explain why some districts are doing better than others. So some of the supply side factors is that we examine are the state capacity to provide goods. So what is the administrative capacity? Some states, and usually this is highly correlated also with the level of development of a state, but can we measure administrative capacity of a state, and can we relate this to performance? The level of development, of course, and then we also look at some of the supply side, political supply side factors, because all of these schemes depend on central funds. So are the states being provided funds? Does the center state alignment matter? Does the swing status of the next election matter? And these are factors that have been examined by other people in the past as well. And then we look at, besides the supply side factors, the demand side factors. So how much do citizens influence the performance of a state? So this could be things like the demand for good quality, how literate is the population, what is the level of accountability, and the objective of the state itself could be human development, that is equity and inclusion. Actually, this could be in the supply side factors as well. Then elite capture is often cited as an important reason why programs like MNREGA especially do not function well, which is the fact that even though there are usually social audits built into the program, these audits are often captured by the elites. And so how do we measure elite capture? Well, one possible measure is ethnic fractionalization. That is, if a particular district or a set of villages in a district has high levels of ethnic fractionalization, then the collective action, the possibilities of collective action to prevent elite capture might be low. So it might be negatively related with the performance at the district level. And then rural wage growth would affect the demand for MNREGA, right? And also may affect the cost of PMGSY. So that could be another possible factor. So we examine all of these in the paper. I'm going to just talk about a few of them. How do we measure state capacity? We use Fukuyama's definition, that is the ability of states to make and enforce rules and to deliver services. So we use this kind of definition to measure district level administrative capacity in 2001, that is sort of at the start, using the 2001 census. And we use, because we don't exactly have details on the inputs of state administrative capacity, like the number of bureaucrats per rural population, etc. We don't have that, or the tax capacity, which could be other better measures, what we use are proxies of capacity, which is based on the stated objectives of state governments, which is to reduce inequality between men and women. So we look at the sex ratio, females per thousand males, the total literacy rate, the female literacy rate, and the gender gap in literacy, percentage of households living in permanent dwellings, those with access to tapped water, electricity, and bathroom, and access to banking facilities. So all of these are measures, these are outcomes that say that the better these outcomes are, the higher is the district level administrative capacity. And so using these measures, we find positive correlations between these measures and the state performance on most indicators for NREGA and PMGSY, except for cost efficiency and quality coverage in the latter. So this is a bit of a puzzle, why this may be so, but quality coverage is maybe not a state, maybe not, it's covered by the National Quality Monitor, so maybe that's why this is what we see in the data. We also use measures of corruption, so we can use, the perceptions of corruption, the bribes paid, and some index of anti-corruption effort that some authors had created. So we use a number of these different measures of accountability, including awareness of citizens about the Right to Information Act, the percentage of households who experienced corruption in 2005, and so we use all of these measures of corruption, and then we also use these political economy measures that I mentioned earlier. And the results are that most of the corruption measures have the sign in the right direction, that is, the higher the perceived corruption, the lower is the performance, but they're not very statistically significant. And one reason could be that unlike the other, the state capacity study, which we could do at the district level, we could only do this at the state level because these corruption measures are only available at state levels. And there are too few observations at this level to get statistical significance. In PMGSY, higher accountability is correlated with higher completion, lower delays, and better quality, and lower contractor concentration, which is all things that we do expect. So like looking at the level of development, again, you see this kind of positive relationship between the composite indicator for PMGSY and the per capita state domestic product. Similarly, for MNREGA, you see this positive relationship. And Human Development Index again. So these are all in the right direction. So I'm going to just conclude here, and the idea was to give you, some kind of a preview of the results that we have. And for further detail, of course, we have the paper which provides all the tables in great detail. So just to give you an idea of what we can do with the data that we have collected, the performance indicators that we have created, right? So our main findings were that while MNREGA has some states that are consistently top performers, it's not the case in PMGSY. It's more nuanced, and over time we do see convergence in PMGSY, which is quite expected. But for NREGA, we do see it in intensity, but not in coverage. And some of these patterns seem to be explained by administrative capacity and the level of development of the states. So again, this is just a sort of a brief kind of introduction to our study, but the paper has much more detail. But the idea is to see if the government can use these indicators and the tables we have created to create this ranking across states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhillon, for sharing such insightful and a very detailed presentation on your analysis. Now, before I open the floor for questions, let me just quickly check. We still have some time, so let us take a few questions now, and then at the end, maybe we can have a more joined, discussion session with all the participants. So those of you who are already here, you can unmute yourself and ask if there is any question to Professor Dhillon. We'll wait for 2 minutes, and if there are no questions, we can move on to the next presenter. The floor is now open, please. Yeah, I think you can turn on your microphones now. I have changed the host controls.
This is Dr. Ramesh from NIRD Hyderabad, madam, and that's an interesting presentation you made. There were many insights in this one. Just I was wondering about this states on the top in Narega. You're saying Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala doing well on the top, and you say Bihar and UP, I mean, not so well. And if you see, Narega is very much required in Bihar, not in Kerala, not in Tamil Nadu, not in Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
Right. In terms of usefulness, and what do you suggest to the government? Like, because I mean, top performing is fine, but I don't need this scheme at all, and the state can do very well even without Narega. Even without Narega, perhaps we are pumping money there; they are using it full, but where the same money can go to Bihar, right? So that is something I was wondering, and I don't know how do you respond to this. This is one.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean we didn't think of like the fact that some states can just do away with the NREGA. I would like to hear other people's opinions on that. But if that is the case, that some states are happy to give it up. Maybe the money can be used in other states which need it much more. But as I said, it's not just the money, because apparently it does turn out that many of the states which need NREGA the most are also the ones which don't use all the budget that they have been given. So it's as I said, it's also a kind of it's also related to the capacity to deliver, right? These schemes. So you may get all the money, but then you need also the kind of capacity, and I don't know how to drill down further into the district level capacity, but that is obviously the most interesting question coming out of this study, which is why do some districts perform better than others? We've done this study at the state level, but obviously there is a need to do it at the more disaggregated level, which is at the district level. And so for that, you need much more data on what is driving this variation across districts in administrative capacity. So that's one big question that I have. So that would be able to speak to this issue.
If I can just add one more question related to PMGSY. You were mentioning just now also, you were mentioning about the state capacity, state capacity, and the indicators that you showed us, they relate to different departments. They relate to different departments. It's about electricity, it's about one ministry, and then water, sanitation, another ministry, women development, another ministry. So they belong to several different ministries. But all said and done, when it comes to implementing PMGSY, it is just one department, right? So, I mean, can't we just have the administrative capacity of just that one department and see how they perform, rather than just seeing state in its entirety? Is that I just don't know the approach. I mean, I'm just asking you, is that the right approach?
Yeah. No, I suppose that what you're arguing for something else. We are saying that these measures are a signal that if a state is not doing well on all of these things, then it's quite likely that it's not doing well on PMGSY, because I suppose it's the same types of cadres that are being used across all these departments, right? So it's the same people who are implementing these different things.
This is Vikas Dikshit from Kolkata.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple of some technical queries. First, when you assess the performance of NRDGA, the period related to it was
2011,
2011, and you while assessing the financial coverage, you divided the spending of the government, right?
Yes.
Per head spending of the state government.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the thing is, under CSS, the transfers prior to 2014, they went directly to the implementing agencies. So they largely used to bypass the state budgets.
Okay.
This is one thing.
Yeah.
Second, under PMJSY,
Yeah.
did you find some evidences of some private participation also in building up the roads?
As in, well, there is the tendering process is based
Right.
on, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is private, right? So,
No, financing
yeah.
aspect of it.
Oh, financing, right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we didn't look at that. We are using only the data available on the public portals, and I suppose this might include some loans from the World Bank as well, right? Some possibly.
Yeah.
So yeah, but regarding the first question on the transfers going directly to the implementing agency, I mean, for our purpose, it doesn't matter, right? We are using we are using the financial expenditure as a measure of like, how effective the state was in implementing. But I suppose your point is that, okay, this is not anything to do with the state. This has to do with the center. That's your point, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you are analyzing a centrally sponsored scheme, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And
That's
that yeah. Okay.
That's a good
Thank-
point. I agree. I mean, we should mention that. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dikshit. We don't have much, so I will, have to end the questioning session for now. And maybe at the end of the second presenter's presentation, we will open it again. But before I go on to the second presenter's presentation, I had a question to Professor Dhilan from myself. And of course, I don't want to, it's not a technical question. We are trying to get some policy inputs from you so that we can document it and put it further. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to read the graph that you're showing me. So my question is that when you see very poor correlations in terms of different, indicators that the state which is, cost, also completing the projects in time and all. So are we, I mean, what is the policy learning from that? Are we saying that the measure of cost efficiency that we are taking is actually not good enough to complete the projects, or maybe we should look at it differently, or maybe change the material ratio that we are following, or maybe change the tendering process to complete? Like, how do we read from a perspective of policy these poor correlations between the different ranks? That's my first question to you. And the second question is that you were talking about social audit, which is very interesting, because I was just thinking, because a lot of differences in NGNREGA demand from one district to other, and this is what we see when we visit the field and when we visit the, for reviews and etc. We see a lot of demand is also dependent on what kind of projects and what kind of work is being taken up in NGNREGA. For example, if we take a work which is close to home, close to the villages and easy to conduct,
Yeah.
maybe a lot of people go and, work there. But if you are taking up work which is very manual and extremely difficult and not as close to the home, people will not go up and work. And that is one north-south difference we see in that as well. So how to kind of include it in your ranking? I know it's still a working paper, you are still working on it, and of course you will work on it in future. So what kind of indicators can we look at to look into the kind of projects as a proxy of, how NGNREGA will be demanded, or how communities will respond to the NGNREGA work? So these are my two questions to you.
Okay. So coming to the second one, we don't actually look at the demand as such. We look only at, for a given demand, how does the state deliver on the on NREGA, right? So we are looking at demand. We are measuring it by the proportion of the poverty, the people who are below the poverty line among rural adults. So we're not doing anything more than that. But we haven't seen any work that looks at the demand for NREGA being a constraint. But what you're suggesting is that even the demand for it is a possible constraint, which might explain why it's not succeeding in some cases. But we haven't seen that anywhere. But that's worth looking at. Then for the first point, what is the policy implication of these different? There's being no correlation between like cost efficiency and completion. So cost efficiency, it could be that the roads that are being completed on time are just having cost overruns. I mean, it could be as simple as that, right? So I don't want to read too much into that. But again, because this is like just a first shot stab at just being able to rank states or districts on these measures, but we don't really, in the paper, we don't really dig very deep into why we are seeing all these patterns. So it's really just a a descriptive paper on the thing, but it's obviously very interesting. I mean, the interest of the paper will ultimately come only from the narratives that we get, right, from the stories that come out of this, but that is for future work. It hasn't been done yet.
Right. Okay, Professor Dhiren, we will take up some more questions at the end because I see the chat box is bursting up. But without much delay, I would like to invite our next presenter. Thomas, are you here? Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so let's hear Thomas presenting the global examples of how to generate livelihood through these infrastructure projects. So Thomas, please present about your work a little bit, and then the work that you're going to do with the audience here. Over to you, Thomas.
Okay. So can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see the PowerPoint. If you start the slideshow, I'll be able to.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to make a presentation. Thank you to Dr. Sahu and Dr. Ruchira. I also would like to thank Professor Dillon for a very interesting presentation that we just heard. So I will take you a little bit of a different direction. I will talk about livelihoods through road maintenance. And this is a presentation that I actually did in the international conference 24 to 26 May that was organized by the Minister of Rural Development on rural roads. And yeah, if you're talking about financing of infrastructure, I think maintenance is probably the most cost-effective way to make sure that the money is well spent. So I will continue to just give you a little bit of a background and context to why the ILO is involved in this type of work. And then I will give you 3 examples from Nepal, from Lebanon, and also a little bit from India, what we have been doing here. So the International Labour Organization, the ILO, is a specialized UN agency. It's devoted to promoting social justice and human labor rights. So the ILO's decent work agenda aims to promote rights at work, to encourage decent employment opportunities, to enhance social protection and strengthen dialogue. Now, the employment-intensive investment program of the ILO is the largest development cooperation program of the organization. And it's a program that targets most vulnerable communities, mainly in the rural areas, to combat unemployment and underemployment and to improve livelihood conditions. So the construction industry, as we know, and in particular the road sector, has a great employment absorption potential. So this is why the ILO has been involved in rural road rehabilitation and maintenance over the last 40 years, with experience from more than 60 countries, mostly low and middle income countries such as Africa, Arab states, Asia, and Latin America. So the EIIP or the ILO, we are focusing mainly on small to medium scale infrastructure investments where an employment intensive approach can be successfully applied. So we're talking about approaches. One of the approach that we are championing is called what we call local resource-based approaches. Now, these are environmental sound work methods and technologies in infrastructure development that optimize employment and ensure environmental sustainability, right? So these comprise work methods and technologies where the use of local resources and local labor is favored and optimized in the delivery of the maintenance of the infrastructure assets. And
Thomas, sorry to interrupt you. Have you started the presentation? Because we can only see the presentation file, but not the...
Yeah, you can't hear me? Hello?
You are audible, Thomas, but we cannot see the full screen mode of the presentation. We can only see the PPT file that you have.
You can't see the presentation? Okay.
First slide only, sir. Not in full screen mode.
Okay, because it's a full screen on my laptop here.
Maybe if you...
Besides, we are seeing the first slide only.
And now?
If you start from beginning, maybe.
Okay. If I do page out. So you only see the first slide. Okay. What do I do then?
No, we saw the second one now.
Okay, you did see the second one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's moving. Yeah.
So you see the second with the International Labour Organization on top?
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
it's visible.
Okay. So basically I was giving the background to the ILO and our involvement. I think if you heard what I was saying, I think I don't need to repeat that. But basically we are focusing on what we call so-called local resource-based approaches, where the use of local resources and local labor is favored and used to the greatest extent possible without affecting cost or quality, right? And we also aim to generate decent and productive employment, through decent work. And we are very much favoring environmental social safeguards in our approaches. And finally, what very important for us is capacity building in all of our activities that we undertake. So let me continue to the next slide. Right. The majority of the population in developing countries live in rural areas, and the primary means of transport is through the use of an access road linking to district roads before connecting to national roads. So all-year access is very important, and continued maintenance is really key to make sure that this access is there throughout the world. And we all know from a technical point of view that maintenance of roads will reduce the rate of deterioration and prolong the life of the road. To reduce the vehicle operation cost for road users, it will provide safe and reliable transport services for road users. But of course, what is very important is that they also act as an instrument for poverty alleviation. They provide access to schools, hospitals. They provide access to agricultural markets and fairs. And we all know that, and this is really, of course, the objective of the PMGSY anyway. But lastly, the point I want to make here, and the point that we are making as a program, is that they can also provide opportunity for gainful employment. So when you apply labor-based work methods, there is a substantial employment potential, and they can be temporary employment or they can be actually long-term employment, depending on the approach. And cash for work schemes in many developing countries have clearly demonstrated that road maintenance can generate much needed jobs and income for people in rural areas. And you can establish a system for maintenance of road network that create employment opportunities that can be sustained for a long period of time while maintaining the investments made in the entire road network. So I usually put this slide on. I think most of you might have seen it before, but I think it underlines the importance of maintenance. When the road is new, we have a new construction. We have slow deterioration in the beginning of the life of the road, which is then going into fast deterioration and then finally total failure, unless there is some.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you twice, but we can only see the file that you have opened. We are not able to see the presentation. Maybe if you share your entire screen instead of the presentation, we will be able to see
Okay.
what you are seeing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Let me try again. Stop sharing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's
If you minimize and open your presentation and start presenting.
minimize this one.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
And from beginning, if you present.
Okay. Sorry.
Top corner in the panel, you click on the top left.
Okay. So, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're audible, Thomas. If you click on the top left option from beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you can see the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, just to do this quickly, the first slides. It's going to be about livelihoods through road maintenance. And I did this presentation in the conference that we had here in Delhi in end of May. And as I also mentioned, we're talking about financing for infrastructure. I think maintenance is really key if you want to be cost effective about infrastructure development. So I will go through now. The first slide is about the context and background why the ILO, the International Labour Organization, is involved in this type of work. So the ILO is a UN agency that promotes a decent work agenda and social justice. And one of the largest programs of the ILO is the EIIP, the Employment Intensive Investment Program, which is about targeting vulnerable people, mainly in the rural areas, about creating better livelihoods through investments in infrastructure, and mainly in rural road rehabilitation maintenance, because those projects do have a very, very great employment absorption capacity. And then I will talk about the approaches. So we use a local resource-based approach, which basically is to maximize or optimize the use of local resources, local labor, local consultants, local materials, but without, jeopardizing the cost effectiveness or quality of the works. So it's very important that the quality is still maintained. And then I was also mentioning that the decent work aspect is key in all what we do. And we are also very strong on environmental and social safeguards in our approach. And of course, capacity building is part of the, the whole package. So this is why the ILO really is involved in infrastructure development, which may sound a bit strange, in some cases. And I was talking about road maintenance, that the connectivity is really key for rural villages, for development, for their livelihoods. But roads must be maintained, and it's very, very important to stress that point of maintenance. And technically speaking, of course, we all know that maintenance is important to reduce the deterioration and prolong the life of the road. It will reduce the vehicle operation cost for road users. It will provide a safe and reliable transport service for road users as well. But I was also mentioning here that it's also really important. Maintenance will act, as an instrument for poverty alleviation. Well-maintained road provide access to schools, hospitals in a sustainable manner throughout the year. They provide access to agricultural markets and fairs. And lastly, the point I wanted to stress was that they provide an opportunity for gainful employment during the maintenance process itself. So there's a substantial potential in providing employment opportunities while we maintain roads. Of course, the road network and improved access in itself is very important, but actually there are opportunities through the construction and maintenance of roads as well. So we are looking at this graph, and I was saying that you might have seen it before, but it's just again to stress the importance of maintenance. We have the new road construction that is good in the beginning, very good, but then it deteriorating slowly, and after a few years, the deterioration is progressing quite quickly until it fails completely. Now, this is if there's no maintenance going on. If we put routine maintenance, day-to-day maintenance on the road from the very beginning, we can slow down this deterioration. Okay, but the maintenance, this routine maintenance in itself is not enough. So we, after a few years, we do periodic maintenance, or we rehabilitate the work to keep it up, and then we continue with the maintenance. And what we say is that the small investment in maintenance can multiply the impact and give much better returns. And many studies by the World Bank and others as well say that $1 invested in regular maintenance saves $45 required for rehabilitation and construction. So this is just to show how important the maintenance is, and how this can be the most cost-effective way of the investments in infrastructure, and also to say that this also provide a huge opportunity for employment creation, because roads needs to be maintained throughout its life. I was also saying that capacity is very important, and we always include that as an element in our approach. Typically, contractors have to go through a pre-bid training, and they need to have a certificate before they can bid for work in ILO projects. And what is important is, how to organize and supervise local resource-based operations, because the client, the engineers, the managers, and contractors, they have to be able to cope with the specific requirements of the EIIP approach. Yeah, I mean, technical standards and rules. Hello?
Please continue.
Yes. We also need to prepare, train for how to prepare and cost and work plan for labor-based approaches. Generally, road maintenance is quite simple, a simple activity, but it's important, especially if there are employment objectives involved, to prepare the contractors for how to prepare the work plan to do the labor resourcing of the work. And we also need to secure the decent work principles, implementation of decent work and environmental and social safeguards. And finally, when we have contracts to tender and administer labor-based roadworks, we want to make sure that they know how to do it, to have good tenders. So we always include a capacity building element in this work. And just to emphasize what is decent work, which we always talk about, well, it includes the fair income, productive work, occupational safety and health, protection against child labor. Working days and hours should be according to the labor code, supporting the legality and status, employment contracts, equality and non-discrimination. So those are, decent work principles. And if we talk about occupational safety and health issues, and specify that even more, we talk about accident insurance, we talk about training for contractors and the staff, proper briefing about safe working practices. There should be provision of adequate gear, hand tools, first aid kits, good hygiene, drinking water, and so on and so forth. So these are really things that we stress in the work that the ILO is promoting. And we have developed a guideline which has been published very recently on environmental and social safeguards, which we can make available to the audience if they want to have a look at it. So this was kind of giving you a broad background to what and why the ILO is involved and the principles behind. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples from different countries. So this is an example from Lebanon, where we are working with the government of Germany and the government of Lebanon, of course, to implement rural road maintenance. And it's a combined and integrated approach of routine maintenance, which is daily maintenance activities, and improvement works, which is spot improvement, because the roads need also to be repaired in certain places. So it's not only the spot improvements. And we're working with the so-called performance-based maintenance. It's a hybrid type of contract where improvement and routine maintenance is combined. And each contractor is managing several community groups for contracts over 1 year. And the wage cost, which is really important in labor-based road construction, is about 40 to 50%. So we see some of the pictures there, how they are spread out and well organized, safety gear, and so on and so forth. Now, each contractor managing routine maintenance groups, and the total length of road for each of those groups that have about 10 members is about 10 kilometers. And each contractor has up to 3 groups, so around 300 kilometers, 30 kilometers of roads. And those routine maintenance groups are recruited from each of the villages along those roads. So these are combined with spot improvements. So the contractor is also responsible for spot improvement and recruit skilled work gang group leaders for those other works. And they are also responsible to provide the community groups with hand tools, materials, and so on and so forth. So the community maintenance groups as I said, 10 workers with at least 2 women and 1 person with disability. The one of the workers is a team leader, and in Lebanese context, the it's because it's a refugee crisis response program, so there are also a lot of Syrian workers. So it's a requirement to have at least half of the skilled workers, unskilled workers being Lebanese, and half of Syrian workers. And then the maintenance strategy over the 1 year is to have inputs twice a year for the routine maintenance groups, and in between you have light routine maintenance where you have also spot improvement activities going on. So these are the activities in Lebanon. And if you go to another country example, this is the strengthening of the National Transport Rural Program in Nepal, which forms part of government of Nepal's efforts to improve road access in rural areas by improving providing maintenance to local roads identified as part of the district core road network. So the development objective of the SNRTP is to enhance availability of reliable transport connectivity for rural communities in the participating districts. So the project was implemented by the Department of Local Infrastructure under the Ministry of Federal Affairs with financial support from the World Bank. And it's implemented in all 37 districts of Nepal. So reaching about 15 million people, which is about half of the population of Nepal. And about 25% of those population are considered poor. Yeah. So the ILO technical assistant was to develop occupational safety and health guidelines and to develop effective system for planning, implementation of road maintenance, and to build capacity in the district offices for the rural transport information system. This capacity was eventually also installed in the development offices of at the provincial level, and the government structure was reorganized in 2018 and 2019. Routine maintenance was implemented through an output-based approach, establishing road maintenance groups. And the road maintenance group members were selected based on road maintenance guidelines developed by the Department of Local Infrastructure. So the recruitment was giving priority to women, to vulnerable people, and each group was responsible for a part of the road network. The routine maintenance works generated, about work for more than 2,600 people working on in those groups, and generated 3.4 million worker days for those routine maintenance group members. 64% were women, and each person made about $138 per month, which is along the minimum wage level in Nepal on average. And because the work is long term, it's a routine maintenance which has to continue for kind of a long-term basis. These workers were employed for more than 1 year. Some of them were 3 or 4 years. So it's almost like a permanent job for them. And due to this long-term employment, some of them, 8%, they became members of local corporate savings schemes. They managed to save, on average, at the end of the program, about $500. Some of them, 60%, engaged in animal husbandry, vegetable cultivation, grocery shops, and so on and so forth. 20% of the people participating in the works constructed their own toilets, or 30% renovated their houses, and 30% purchased land. So it was very important activity of this program to also enhance the livelihood. So that was kind of one of the key aspects as well as the improvement of the roads. And finally, the ILO also provided some assistance to PMGSY, mainly in developing maintenance and policy guidelines at both national and state level on road maintenance, including incorporating decent work elements in the contracts. The ILO also helped develop and deliver training for engineers and contractors on road maintenance works And there was a study on the impact assessment of maintenance roadworks done in 2015. So it's a little bit old by now, but it clearly showed that the connectivity and the all-weather access has been really very beneficial for the rural communities. It also noted that not all states that have been involved utilized the maintenance fund effectively, and this is now some years back. So this kind of may have changed. And I also heard or learned in the conference that new asset management systems have been put in place. They have the electronic system for monitoring road maintenance and so forth. So just to say that the road maintenance is really important to maintain the all-weather access, and also to say that there are great opportunities through road maintenance or road rehabilitation to involve people and to create and generate decent work. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That was an excellent presentation. In fact, in the last meeting that we had with NIRDPR that I was referring to in the emails earlier, we were talking about the possibilities of public-private partnership in PMGSY and rural transportation. And also, I mean, this opens so many possibilities to include communities, to include women, the self-example in maintenance of roads, and to generate employment and livelihood as well. We will, of course, come back to you with more queries on the policy side. But before that, let me open the discussion for some more questions from our participants. I think one of the questions that we heard earlier on the private investment in PMGSY is already responded by you in your last slide. But let us have a few more questions from the participants on your presentation or in the overall presentations in general. So the floor is now open. Nagarajan ji, if you want to ask a question, you can unmute and ask, or I can read out the question on your behalf. I have changed the host control so that you can unmute.
Sir, good day and live to all. Sir, what about the disaster resilient roads and infrastructures?
Sorry, can you maybe expand? What is your question?
So generally, globally, we are facing many disasters, many natural calamities. We are our basic infrastructures are greatly damaging, causing economic losses and life losses. What about the disaster resilient roads, buildings, and disaster resilient infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean,
what are the suggestions?
I mean, I think this is very important, and to include that in the design, so that we build roads with proper drainage, with proper slope stabilization, and so on. So I think this is extremely important, and I think if in areas with flooding, you need to maybe raise the embankment and so on. So I think it's I'm sure I mean. Colleagues from PMGSY, I'm sure they can answer that question, but definitely we have to take climate change, climate adaptation into consideration in design, and it's also important when you to maintain road, because if you have blocked drains or blocked then you have a problem with water washing away the roads. So yeah, so climate adaptation is very important, absolutely.
Yes. At the same time, based on the areas, hill areas and plain areas and coastal areas, the estimates and the methods of road laying must differ, and it must be technically supported.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that the design standards are taking care of that. So do you have designs that are appropriate for hilly areas, for mountainous areas, and for flat terrain? So absolutely, that has to be taken care of, for sure.
We cannot commonly use the same methods. So
yeah, Nagarajan, I think your comments are well taken and acknowledged.
thanks a
If
lot.
don't have any other questions, I have actually a question to Thomas, because we find that converging the programs of public work in India with construction of roads or infrastructure in general, the main constraint that we see is the GFR rules, which are very strict, that in tendering you cannot bring in Narega labor, and you cannot combine something that is tender based with a public work, or the labor hours from the Indian RDGA. So globally, since you have seen a few cases, is there any prior example that we can resort to if we are to build a recommendation for the government, that how to combine something which is so strictly tender based with something which is public work or self-help group, or not aligned with the tendering system? Is there any example that you have from any other countries?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do. I mean, we include this is tender on for private contractors, but this is what I was trying to emphasize on the training part, and also on how we specify the works. Depends. I mean, you don't want to specify works that is not appropriate, but there are some aspects of road construction and road maintenance that are very well appropriate to do using labor intensive work methods, and that can be specified in contract documents, in the specification, and in the clauses and so forth. But it has to be done in a well managed and well organized manner, and this is what we have done in many countries. So we have contractors trained in labor intensive approaches, and they are then obliged to undertake works with certain labor and social aspects. It's not just the technical work, but also to involve and include local labor and local equipment and local resources. So that's part of the package, and and I think that can be specified for certain type of work, not all of it, but certain type of the work. If it has to be attractive to PMGSY or to India, it has also to be cost effective and maintain the quality, which is very important.
Thank you, Thomas. We see a few hands raised here. I would request them to unmute and ask their questions. First is Parvez Hamadwani. Sir, please unmute and ask your question. Parvez Hamadwani. Yeah, I don't think he's hand raised. I see he's off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr. Wani, your hand was raised earlier. You may please ask your question. You are muted. You have to unmute yourself. Next is Mr. Abhijit Kotian. I see his hand raised. If you have a question, please unmute and ask. Abhijit Kotian. I see he has dropped a few questions in the chat box. Okay, his question is regarding table number 4 in Professor Dhillon's paper. He's asking whether the value indicates value of nation or state. I haven't seen the table. Maybe Professor Dhillon will be better equipped to respond to that.
I'm just having a look at the table. I don't know where it is.
I also not. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
See.
Table 4.
I must commend you. You have gone through the paper at such speed.
I actually didn't. I thought I was running out of my 20 minutes. So
Right.
Table 4. Table 4.
Is it table 4 or figure? Okay, table 4.
Table 4, right? So,
Mjnari dynamic analysis, beta coefficients. Are
yeah.
you
So this is state level, no? What the question was? Obviously it's the state level.
okay?
Yeah.
I guess that
Because
responds to your query.
yeah, we are just looking at whether there is convergence across the states. And so if you get a negative coefficient, it indicates that there is convergence. So we are regressing the growth rate on the initial value. And so if there's convergence, you'll see a negative coefficient. But it's the state level.
He also is asking the entire population coverage or how many people are taken into consideration for the survey. It's not a survey, I think it's a publicly available data that you have used. So that
Yeah.
the presentation you already clarified. And Abhijit's other question is there any policy that the budget debt cannot be given to MGNRG during COVID crisis? No, there is. What are you referring to? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
No, I don't think there is any such policy.
Yeah.
In fact, during COVID crisis, MGNRG had a extra some 4,000
Enhanced.
allotted for the migrant laborers returning.
Yeah,
So
I think maybe that's what he means. Yeah. We can't expect to give labor-based works. Right. So many states have peri-urban panchayats where we can't expect to give labor-based works. Why not avoid such financially rich and reallocate the amount to needy and weak panchayats? Yeah, that might be a good policy prescription. But I mean, the paper doesn't answer that, so I can't say
also,
anything on that.
reallocating budget is a very sensitive
Yeah,
issue. It cannot be
yeah,
described by us in the
yeah,
document. I'll have to.
yeah.
I see Virender Agrawal's hand raised. Sir, can you please unmute and ask your question? Virender Agrawal. Virender Agrawal. Okay, no response from there. So let me open the floor. If anyone else has a question, please unmute and ask.
Yes, ma'am. Hello. Good afternoon, Dylan, ma'am. I have a question that India is spending huge amount of expenditure on engineering since down to the 10 years. Do you think for well-performing states, is there a return on investment of this budget?
Is there a better?
In better performing states, is there a return on investment? Because India is spending huge amount on NREGA since last 10 years. Do you observe any return on investment on that spending?
So the return on spending, I think we can only measure it by the performance indicators. So is the program fulfilling its objectives of providing livelihood security to the poorest people? So in those terms, we have created those indices. So from that, you can see how the budget is being used, right?
Yeah.
So the performance is the return, in fact, right?
And one more thing is that resources like are created at the ground level or not, like for spending the.
Yeah. So we did look at asset creation because we found the data was a bit patchy on that. So we did not look at asset creation in this paper.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Madam, Energies has made a great change. It increased the purchasing power of the poor and the rural people. But at the same time, we are spending a lot of money every year, but we are not able to create the desirable and durable assets as we thought, as we planned. But anyhow, the rural poor are benefiting. But at the same time, my question is, why you allow all the people can work in NRGS? Why not specifically mention only the landless agricultural laborers and BPL persons be allowed in the MGNRGs?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the program is supposed to be self-targeting, but I don't know how far this self-targeting is working. But the idea is that the wages paid are like minimum wages are pretty low wages, and the kind of work is not very attractive. So for somebody who doesn't need to do it, you shouldn't want to do it, right? That's supposed to be incentive compatible in that sense. But we do know that, of course, corruption is taking place, and some, there are ghost workers and ghost projects and all that. Uh, some of it may have been reduced by the direct benefits scheme that the government has started recently, but I think that the program was supposed to be a self-targeting one. So it obviously it's very, it is more administratively burdensome to try to target it to certain people, right? But I know there's been a lot of controversy around that, and people are questioning whether there should be some kind of some kind of eligibility criteria based on whether you own land or not. But that's not a debate we enter. Yeah.
Madam, I think the MGNRGs is mainly concentrated to provide the rural employment. Previously, we have FG or Y Employment Action Scheme, EA scheme. Before that, we have oral eligibility scheme, NREP scheme. Before that, in 1970s, we had Food for Work program. That is to rural people a minimum wages or minimum food to sustain their life. So the main aim of the scheme is to provide employment to the rural masses at the time of agricultural leave periods. During agriculture periods, they are able to get employments, but it is only mentioned for the agricultural lean periods. So why not we give preference to the landless agricultural laborers and only BPL people? Because APL peoples are also coming, they are not working as we expected. So that only we are facing some setbacks and drawbacks in the scheme. So we can give necessary amendments by the suggestions of the great institutions like you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nagarajan. A lot of policy input from you. If there are no other questions from the audience, I would like to ask Dr. Partha if he has any question.
Ma'am, I have one.
Yeah, Sureshji, please.
Yes, ma'am, it was nice presentation. Like both the presentation, I was enjoying it. With respect to the NREGA one, so the performance we are seeing that that's actually doing best. But before going to the performance, we have to see the access to the work first. So I have find two issues here. One is like we have only 100 days of work per household, not to individual. So if in a family there are husband and wife, and also maybe the younger children, the adult people. So if 3 people are going to a work, it's like within maybe, how can I say, 6 weeks, like 5 weeks or 6 weeks, the work will finish. I like 1 month, or 1.5 months. And that is one issue, ma'am. And another issue is like, if you see the single woman or widowed people. So sometimes this work is very heavy. You have to dig the like maybe some meters into the. So during that time, these women were denied the work because of the heavy work. And the other time, the other side, actually they have to give the what is called other work or the unemployment allowance, because these people are not unaware about the unemployment allowance or the other work. So we are denying the work itself. So I just want to ask these access problems. Have you come across it when you were studying this program?
So as I said, since we relied only on the aggregate data at the, from the publicly available data, we have not done any surveys or field work. So we don't really, know about the access issues beyond what beyond what's on the publicly available portal. And possibly Dr. Ruchira will be a better, place to answer these questions. But yeah, I agree that there might be some days that women are denied work because the type of work available is not suitable for them. But I mean, there is, I think now there is an increasing understanding of the importance of climate, environmental and climate works that for women might be very suitable. So I think in the future there should be some work available like that. But I do believe that one of the things I came across in the study was that a lot of people claim that there is often collusion between the workers and the panchayat, the providers of employment, where they kind of get a kind of mechanical or whatever mechanized. They use mechanization to do the work, but then the workers accept a lower wage in return for signing the documents and so on. So there is that kind of collusion happening. That is something we did come across. But I think these are important points about whether it should be at the level of the household. I suppose the problem is the budget is very constrained. So maybe Dr. Ruchira has more to say on that.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, with MGNREGA, the performance ranking of the state is the beginning point of the discussion. And then we have to see, like, state-wise, there are so many different issues, different difficulties, which is unique to some of the states. For example, in Jammu and Kashmir, we saw that there was a huge labor to material ratio violation leading to a huge pendency issue, which still could not be resolved. And if you talk about durability of the projects, then you have to, I mean, how can you keep the labor to material ratio intact and still talk about durability, because material is very important for durability of the projects. Also, exclusion, or the moment you talk about targeting, there is a huge burden of exclusion that comes on the community. And if that happens, how do you really complete the project if you are not taking labor in when you need to complete it in a certain deadline? How does it work? There are also issues of the project being carried out on donated land, and then the person who has donated it later on, going back on the promise of donation and saying that, no, I don't want to donate the land for. So there are stretches of road which are complete for a few kilometers, and then we see the road is not existent because the donated land was taken back by the person who is donating. So these are micro level issues, which if you start reading from one state to the other might come out as a pattern, or as a, very well a reason why some of the pendency issues and non-completion issues kind of arise. But with women, of course, this is something that we learned from our, the village studies that we did, especially with the Palanpur study that we did earlier, that when it comes to women working outside domestic sphere, or women working outside their domestic enterprise, MGNREGA in rural areas still now is the biggest sector which kind of employs them, because there is some tag of a government connected to MGNREGA, also the security of getting the payment. Even if it's delayed, they'll still get it. So these things actually attract women more. And we saw in COVID how much women required the MGNREGA work. So even, again, coming back to the question of targeting the program and excluding some people, that we have to really think about it from a gender lens as well, that whether we want to do it or not, given the, the volatility of their situation. Of course, we can continue to discuss these things. And I believe that this will be a start of the discussion, start of more work on these issues. But today's webinar, we cannot cover all of these aspects, and limit the discussion to the performance indicators, the performance of the states, the comparison of the states, and also this possibility of combining the public works, or bringing employment or livelihood in these sectors of infrastructure. So the reason why I put these two presentations in one single webinar was to kind of put it in the same roundtable, that we can have state performances and then improve it if we start thinking innovatively to include more sectors, converge more sectors. So if the state is not performing well in completing and maintaining the project, maybe can we bring in public works, can we bring in women, BCGs, the self-help groups, and try to cater to those requirements. So with those comments from me, and if there are no other questions, I would really like to thank Professor Amrita Dhillon and Mr. Tomas Stenstrom for their time and for taking the pain of creating this presentation for us and presenting in front of us, engaging in such discussion with such a patient manner and responding to each and every question. I would now like to request Dr. Sahu to formally close the program so that we can thank everyone and move on to our day's work. Dr. Saab.
Thank you, Dr. Ruchira. Actually, I missed some part of the discussion, so I apologize. And on behalf of NIRD, on behalf of the coordinating team, again, I thank both the eminent panelists, Dr. Dhillon and Mr. Thomas. And we would like to carry forward this discussion. And I also thank all the participants who attended. And we look forward to their continuous attendance, participation, and contribution to this SDG webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we close and go on with our routine, to Professor Dhillon and to Mr. Stenstrom, we would like to let you know that these webinar series that we are doing, this is the 8th of the series. We have done 7 before in different areas of SDGs. We are basically trying to move forward to a handbook of rural development policy. And when we author the handbook, when we are planning it, we would like to then again reach out to you for a less technical but more policy-oriented, draft of what you have presented today. And I really hope that at that time you will be with us and participate in drafting the RD policy. So with that, let me thank you and good evening, and hope to see you in the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.